Imagine being born to the most famous scientist on Earth, then spending your entire life trying to escape her shadow. This is the story almost nobody knows. April 1906. On a rain-soaked street in Paris, Pierre Curie's life ended in a single tragic moment. The man who had changed the world with science was suddenly gone. Behind the headlines, a little girl stood silently in the doorway, watching her mother struggle to absorb the unimaginable. Irène was only 9 years old. She had just inherited a name the whole world admired, and a loss no child should ever carry. Marie Curie believed an extraordinary mind deserved an extraordinary education. Instead of sending Irène to an ordinary school, she created a private classroom where some of France's greatest scientists, among them Nobel Prize winners, taught a small circle of gifted children. For Irène, science wasn't just a subject. It was the language she grew up speaking. One day, lost in the middle of a math problem, Irène casually tossed her notebook out the classroom window rather than lose her train of thought. She simply walked downstairs, picked it up, and finished the solution. Years later, she wrote to her mother that equations no longer seemed difficult. They had become beautiful. 1914, the Western Front. The First World War had turned Europe into a landscape of mud, trenches, and endless casualties. While thousands fled the front, Marie Curie drove toward it. She created a fleet of mobile X-ray units known as the Little Curies, and on many of those dangerous journeys, her teenage daughter, Irène, rode beside her, heading straight into the heart of the war. At just 17, Irène followed her mother from one battlefield to the next. Together, they unloaded the fragile X-ray equipment, preparing to bring science where it was needed most. Before long, Irène was operating the machines herself, helping surgeons locate bullets and shrapnel hidden deep inside the wounded, without opening the body blindly. Not everyone welcomed the Little Curies. Many surgeons doubted the machines, and some doubted the young woman standing beside them even more. Patiently, Irène explained every step, determined to prove that science could save lives. One battlefield after another, one wounded soldier after the next. Wherever the fighting moved, the Little Curies followed. And with every mile they traveled, more lives were saved because someone finally chose to trust the invisible. November 11th, 1918, the guns finally fell silent. But for Marie Curie, the mission was far from over. She turned from the battlefield to a dream she had carried for years. The Radium Institute. Inside the Curie Pavilion, Irène stepped into a laboratory that would become her second home. It was here that she began the research that would eventually change the history of nuclear science. To many people, Irène seemed distant. Some colleagues even described her as cold, almost like an iceberg, quiet, intensely focused, and rarely distracted. But then came a young physicist with an entirely different personality. Irène Joliot was warm, energetic, and impossible to ignore. Little by little, he broke through the walls she had built around herself. And on October 4th, 1926, the two were married, beginning one of the greatest scientific partnerships in history. What happened next would become the greatest opportunity and the greatest mistake of Irène Joliot-Curie's scientific life. By 1932, at the Radium Institute in Paris, they began an experiment that would bring them closer than anyone had ever come to discovering a completely new particle without realizing it. They were trying to answer a simple question. What happens when the powerful radiation from polonium strikes the nucleus of another element? To find out, they placed a tiny source of polonium beside a piece of beryllium. Their goal wasn't to discover a new particle. They simply wanted to understand how atomic nuclei reacted when bombarded by energetic alpha particles. Then they added a block of paraffin wax behind the beryllium. Paraffin contains large amounts of hydrogen, making it the perfect material for detecting anything energetic coming out of the experiment. Almost immediately, the detector responded. Something invisible had passed through the beryllium, and struck the hydrogen atoms inside the paraffin, sending them flying with remarkable energy. Irène and Frédéric carefully analyzed the data, but they reached the wrong conclusion. But what they believed they had found was not what they had actually discovered. The radiation passing through the paraffin was far more penetrating than expected. Irène and Frédéric concluded that the beryllium was producing an unusually energetic form of gamma rays. The measurements matched. The calculations seemed convincing. Yet one question refused to disappear. How could gamma rays produce particles moving so fast? For days, they checked the apparatus, repeated the experiment, and reviewed every calculation. The data never changed. Standing only a few steps away from one of the greatest discoveries in physics, they never realized the answer was already in front of them. Then came the shock. In February 1932, at the University of Cambridge, James Chadwick re-examined the evidence. He correctly identified the mysterious radiation as the neutron, a discovery that earned him the 1935 Nobel Prize in Physics. But the next discovery wouldn't slip away. In 1934, Irène and Frédéric turned their attention to aluminum. They placed a thin sheet of aluminum in front of a polonium source. Then they removed the source. The experiment should have been over, but something extraordinary happened. The aluminum kept emitting radiation.
For the first time in history, humans had created artificial radioactivity.
But Irène and Frédéric's discovery was more than a scientific breakthrough. It opened the door to technologies that would one day save millions of lives. From diagnosing disease to treating cancer, sterilizing medical equipment, advancing scientific research, and even generating electricity. Artificial radioactivity became one of humanity's most powerful tools. The impact of their discovery was impossible to ignore. In 1935, Irène and Frédéric Joliot-Curie were awarded the Nobel Prize in Chemistry for the discovery of artificial radioactivity.
We have grown accustomed to prizes and honors in our family.
But only a few years later. Europe was at war once again. While Irène remained committed to protecting her research, Frédéric joined the French resistance. Irène had become a wanted scientist. Her children, her research, and her own life were all at risk. On June 6, 1944, as Allied forces landed on the beaches of Normandy, Irène and her children quietly crossed the French-Swiss border. She carried only what mattered most, her family, and the scientific notebooks that held years of her life's work. She escaped, but her work never stopped. After the war, Irène returned to France. She resumed her research and devoted herself to science once again. But years of working with radiation, long before modern safety standards, had already taken their toll. She developed leukemia, the same illness that had claimed her mother's life. Near the end of her life, she is widely quoted as saying, "I am not afraid of death. I have had an exciting life." Irène Joliot-Curie died in 1956 at the age of 58.